Mystery neighbors. The suspicious bearded man at the end of Pinewood Lane. Address: 1189 Pinewood Lane. Vehicle: gray Ford F-Nex 150. Daily walking routine: 6:15 a.m. along the east fence line.
Halloween's the perfect cover. People want a scare, and that bearded recluse who never waves is genuinely unsettling.
By 9 a.m., 940 glossy copies were spooling out of the HOA's high-speed printer. Each one landed in a mail slot before lunch. By 2 p.m., a neighbor had scanned it to the Pinewood Community Social page. At 8:15 that evening, a U.S. Marshals analyst running a dark web keyword scrape hit a tripwire. Marshall Reed, Brian Mercer's protective coordinator, stared at the screen. The post contained his protected witness's unredacted address and physical description. Within 3 minutes, a federal breach notification went to 3 agencies and a relocation team spun up. The newsletter was flagged as a ITSEC felony exhibit, a piece of paper now worth 15 years in federal prison. Inside a quiet cabin at the end of Pinewood Lane, Brian Mercer poured his morning coffee, completely unaware that his name had just been traded for a HOA gossip column. At 8:21, Brian's secure phone buzzed on the kitchen counter.
Brian, your location's been compromised. WithSec protocol is active. Grab your bag. We're at the East Gate in 10.
Compromised? From what?
He was already pulling the go bag from under the bed, moving with the muscle memory of a man who had been hunted before. At the Hammond residence, 2 FBI vehicles cut their lights and pulled into the driveway.
Ma'am, I am Special Agent Harris. You published classified witness details. We are here to seize all copies of the newsletter.
Classified? It's a neighborhood column. Who's the witness?
An evidence tech bagged the stack while a second agent photographed the computer. 6 miles east, Brian's truck never left the driveway. He was in a Marshall's SUV, heading toward a temporary safe house. Maria's hands were not cuffed, but her world had just shrunk to the inside of her front door, and 3 federal agents between her and the outside.
Maria Hammond, you are charged under 18 U.S.C. 1512, witness tampering, and 3,521 W. Sick violation. Up to 20 years in prison.
Witness tampering? It's just a newsletter Halloween column. You can't be serious.
Mark pulled onto the street and saw 4 federal vehicles blocking his driveway.
Maria, what's going on? Let me through. That's my wife.
Sir, I am Agent Harris. Your wife published classified witness details. Do you hold a security clearance?
Yes, I am a contractor. But what witness? We don't know anyone in protection.
The sheriff's deputies, who arrived first, stepped aside. This was federal now. Harris cuffed Maria. The click echoed, and her protests died.
Your employer will be notified. Get a lawyer. Don't leave town.
Mark held the FBI card, watching the taillights fade. The newsletter had been a gag. Now it might cost him everything. At his defense contractor office, the next morning, a personnel security officer handed Mark a single sheet of paper. Pursuant to federal security directives, your clearance is suspended effective immediately pending investigation.
Suspended? Because of a newsletter column?
That evening, the HOA board convened an emergency session. The conference room smelled of stale coffee and panic. The insurance binder lay open. A highlighted clause read, "Exclusion, Witness Protection Program Violations." The directors stared at the words. They were completely exposed. The association could be bankrupted by lawsuits. In a federal holding facility, Laura Finch walked Maria Hammond through the charges.
You are facing 5 to 20 years in federal prison. Witness tampering and double-sick breaches carry mandatory minimums.
But I didn't know. It was just a neighborhood Halloween piece. How could I know?
Her voice cracked. The room felt smaller. Maria Hammond finally understood she was going to prison. 3 days later, the formal revocation arrived, clearance permanently rescinded, employment terminated with no appeal. A security officer waited as Mark packed his desk. 15 years in defense contracting, ended by a newsletter. That same day, Laura Finch laid out federal sentencing guidelines on the metal table in the jail conference room.
You published a protected person's home address. Intent doesn't matter. The law says you are a felon.
So he hides in a cabin and we're the criminals? That's insane. If he's a threat, why was he here?
Laura flipped open a binder to a highlighted section of the Witness Protection Statute.
18 U.S.C. 3521. You doxed a federal witness. That's a felony, and you did it in print.
Maria stared at the words until they blurred. She wasn't a nosy editor. She was an accomplice to a national security breach. Mark drove home with a box of office supplies. His phone buzzed with a rejection from a former colleague who'd already heard. The Hammond family was falling apart because of something sitting in an evidence bag half a mile away. The HOA's insurance binder confirmed it. Witness protection violations were excluded. Every board member stared at the page. The liability could reach millions. The association had no safety net. Special Agent Harris walked into the boardroom with a federal order. The local deputies stepped back.
Effective immediately, all community communications must be pre-cleared by the U.S. Marshals Service. No more newsletters.
The board president looked around the table, then called for a vote. The vote was unanimous. The Pinewood Estates newsletter was permanently dissolved. Past issues were fed into a shredder. The room filled with the sound of paper being destroyed.
We'll monitor compliance. Any violation will result in further sanctions.
A new sign appeared on the clubhouse bulletin board. Communications pre-cleared by USMS. The neighborhood that had built its identity around chatter was now radio silent, waiting for Maria Hammond's public reckoning. Inside a temporary safe house, Brian Mercer stared at a dark web forum thread about himself.
Over 100 comments, bounties, a buyer asking for facial recognition.
A foreign IP in Beijing accessed the newsletter within 20 minutes. We believe it belongs to the contractors you testified against.
Reed turned the laptop. The breach wasn't local. It had crossed continents.
You can't go back, Brian. WITSEC authorizes permanent relocation and a new name.
Permanent? That means my property, my grandfather's land, gone.
The trust will purchase it at market value and transfer it to a veterans organization. You'll sign it over.
So I lose everything? Even my name? What's the point if I cease to exist?
Brian looked out the barred window at a generic parking lot. For a whistleblower, the price of truth was erasure. He had helped recover $1.4 billion in fraud. Now he was becoming a ghost. Laura Finch placed Mark's termination notice on the steel table. The paper landed with a finality that filled the room.
Clearance revoked. Employment terminated with no appeal. Oh, God. No.
The monitor on the wall flickered. Mark appeared, hollow-eyed from a video link.
They walked me out, Maria. My clearance, the job, it's all gone. The house is next.
He's the one hiding. If he's so dangerous, why was he living next door? This is his fault, not mine.
You chose to publish his address. Intent doesn't matter. The law says you are a felon.
She's right. I wrote the column. I circled his address. I did it.
The Hammond savings were gone, drained on the retainer. Mark's income was zero. The house was in pre-foreclosure. Maria Hammond stared at the ceiling of her cell. The newsletter column that had seemed so clever was now a federal exhibit. 940 copies. One evidence bag. A family and a community destroyed by a Halloween joke. The Pinewood Estates Community Hall was standing room only. Anger hung in the air like steam.
Maria Hammond published the home address of a federal witness. That is a felony under 18 U.S.C. 1512 and 3521.
Gasps spread, then mutters turned to shouts. The man they had feared was a victim, not a threat.
Your newsletter nearly got a man killed. His enemies monitor that address now.
From the third row, a woman demanded if the HOA was liable.
The association is exposed. Your insurance doesn't cover witness protection violations.
A man near the back asked if his own mortgage was at risk. No one answered.
From today, every community message must be pre-cleared by my office. Any violation, and we prosecute.
The meeting ended in silence. No one defended Maria Hammond. They returned home to wait for the official reading of her plea, the next chapter in a disaster that started with a Halloween gag. 2 days later, a second letter arrived from Mark. permanent debarment from all federal contracting, no appeal left.
I am blacklisted. 15 years of clearances gone. No defense contractor will touch me.
At the HOA board meeting, the president read aloud a civil lawsuit filed by the family of a man Brian had once testified against.
The association is named as a co-defendant. You facilitated the breach that put that man's life in danger.
In the jail conference room, Laura Finch opened a red folder and laid out the prosecution's first plea offer.
Plead guilty to a federal misdemeanor. You surrender the house in restitution. The recommended sentence is probation.
Surrender our home. Mark will never forgive me. That house is everything we had.
Your home is already in pre-foreclosure. This deal is the only way you avoid federal prison.
I destroyed us. A Halloween column. I destroyed everything.
Outside the federal building, a U.S. Marshal's emblem gleamed on every vehicle. There was no escape from the weight of what she had done.
If you refuse this deal and go to trial, the sentencing guidelines are 18 to 24 months, but they'll push for the maximum 20 years.
I didn't know he was in a protection program. I am a neighborhood editor, not a spy.
The statute doesn't require knowledge. You published his location. The jury will see a woman who watched too many crime shows.
300 miles away, Marshal Reed placed a property transfer deed in front of Brian Mercer.
Sign this, and the federal trust purchases your land. It goes to a veterans outreach program.
Maybe it's better this way. Let the land do some good.
Brian signed. The pen didn't pause. He retrieved a worn photograph of his grandfather from his wallet. The old man standing beside a pine sapling.
You told me don't let the bastards win. They won't. This is my choice.
Maria Hammond's cell grew colder. Laura Finch gave her a week to decide. If she refused, the prosecution would seek 20 years. The federal order arrived by certified courier. Its cover page required public reading of Maria's plea as a condition of ongoing oversight.
This order supersedes all HOA rules. The plea will be read at a special meeting on the 15th. No exceptions.
The board president scanned the order silently, then looked up. The date was set. The room felt smaller. No one objected. The newsletter office keys were surrendered to a federal evidence bag.
The office will be emptied permanently. All communications must be pre-cleared for 2 years.
A custodian unplugged the high-speed printer. The machine that had printed 940 copies went silent. On the clubhouse bulletin board, a new notice replaced the old schedule. Communications pre-cleared by us MS, effective immediately. Outside the clubhouse, a USMS vehicle idled. Deputy marshals stood at the entrance watching. The neighborhood had lost its voice. Now it would witness the cost of one woman's Halloween column. 940 families would gather in the community hall on the 15th. The room was already being arranged. On the morning of the deadline, Mark Hammond's face appeared on the videophone. He looked hollow, aged.
Sign it, Maria. We have nothing left to fight with. Sign it and come home.
Home? We don't have a home. I signed it away.
The plea reduces it from 20 years to probation. You can rebuild.
Laura slid the agreement across the table. Maria's hand trembled above the signature line. She signed. The pen dragged slow across each page, a sound like tearing fabric.
I killed our life with a Halloween column.
Mark nodded once. Then the screen went black. He didn't say goodbye. Laura Finch notarized the final page and sealed it in a manila envelope stamped Plea Agreement, United States v. Hammond. The envelope would be unsealed in 5 days in front of 940 neighbors. The date was circled on every calendar in Pinewood Estates. The cottage sat on a low bluff above the Pacific. The only sound the hiss of surf through the cracked window. Marshal Reed handed Brian a slim envelope with a new driver's license and a social security card.
This is my life now. The ocean is better than bars.
Brian sank onto the porch rocker, watching a freighter crawl across the horizon. He looked older now, 400 miles inland. Maria Hammond stood in her empty living room, a roll of packing tape in her hand. A sold sign covered the realtor board. The mortgage company had taken the rest. She pulled the fuchsia blazer off its hanger. The fabric still smelled like dry cleaning solvent. She let it drop to the closet floor. Through the frosted front door glass, her silhouette moved distorted and slow, the last box pressed against her chest. Mark sat in the empty living room, an indentation on the carpet where the sofa used to be. The house smelled like nothing. Brian poured his coffee into a chipped mug and sat on the porch. The tide was coming in. He didn't know what came next. The Pinewood Estates Community Hall smelled of floor wax and dread. Folding chairs stretched to the back wall. The board members rehearsed the reading protocol, their voices low, the insurance binders still open on the table. At noon, a U.S. Marshal's courier walked up the clubhouse steps carrying a manila envelope sealed with red tape. The board president signed for it with a trembling hand. The envelope felt heavier than 5 pages should. It was placed in the clubhouse safe, beside the stacks of confiscated newsletters. Under a deputy's watch, a grainy photo of Brian's cabin circulated on the community app alongside messages of pity and fury. Agent Harris stood at the back of the hall, arms crossed, watching the crowd assemble like a sentencing judge. Outside, sheriff's deputies directed traffic. The clubhouse buzzed with the low rumble of 940 families waiting to hear the truth. Inside the sealed office that once held the high-speed printer, the evidence boxes sat locked, labeled United States v. Hammond. Tomorrow morning, the unsealing would happen. Every resident would hear what Maria Hammond had agreed to, and what her Halloween joke had cost them all. The morning of the 15th broke cold and clear. By 9 o'clock, the hall was packed shoulder to shoulder. On the projection screen, Maria Hammond sat in a federal conference room, her hands folded on the table, her face drained of color.
940 families, they're all watching me.
The HOA president stepped to the podium, tapped the microphone, and the murmur died. He unfolded the federal order, read the preamble in a monotone, then broke the red wax seal on the manila envelope. The rip of the tape cut through the silence. A woman in the third row grabbed her husband's arm. Agent Harris stood motionless in the back, his jaw set. The president unfolded the crisp pages. 940 breaths held. He adjusted his reading glasses and began to read aloud. The defendant, Maria Hammond, admits willfully publishing the protected address of a federal witness in violation of 18 U.S.C. 1512 and 3521. She surrenders her home in restitution and accepts a misdemeanor plea.
I am so sorry. I didn't know what I was doing. I never meant to put anyone in danger.
Her voice cracked and the screen flickered. In the hall, 940 people sat frozen. The president read the final line. The Pinewood Estates newsletter is permanently dissolved. All communications must now be pre-cleared by the U.S. Marshal Service.
The association is under federal oversight. Any violation of the communications protocol will be referred for prosecution.
The plea agreement was projected on the screen, Maria Hammond's signature beneath a confession of federal negligence.
This is what I made, a Halloween column and a ruined life.
The room emptied in near silence. No one approached Mark Hammond, who sat alone in the back row. The president refolded the document. A deputy sealed it in a fresh evidence bag.
Written guidelines will be distributed. Follow them exactly. The court will review compliance in 60 days, effective immediately. Every community message must be pre-cleared by this office, 48 hours prior to publication. No exceptions.
The board members nodded, their faces pale, as the weight of 2 years of federal supervision settled over them. A custodian wheeled out the last stack of newsletters. The shredder ran for 10 minutes, reducing 940 copies to confetti. A new laminated sign replaced the old newsletter schedule. Communications must be pre-cleared. SMS. On the projection screen, the video feed flickered and collapsed into black. Maria Hammond was gone. Mark Hammond stood stiffly in the back row, then turned and walked out alone. No one followed. Agent Harris folded his notes, stepped past the local deputies, and exited without another word. The evidence boxes were carried out on a cart, labeled U.S. v. Hammond. The newsletter was officially a closed case. Outside, The U.S. Marshal's emblem gleamed on the door of a black SUV, a reminder that the neighborhood was under federal watch. On the bulletin board, the new sign gleamed under institutional lights. The Pinewood Estates newsletter had become a federal compliance notice. On a Thursday morning, a ribbon was cut at 1189 Pinewood Lane. Veterans in caps stood before a new wooden sign. A federal trust had purchased the property and deeded it to a transitional housing program for former service members. 400 miles away, Brian Mercer sat on his porch and watched the local news clip on a tablet.
They put a ramp over the threshold. Grandpa would have liked that.
The sign read Veterans Transition Center, the same spot where his mailbox once stood. He slid the red witness protection card from his wallet and set it beside the screen.
This is the part of the story the newsletter will never print.
The camera showed families arriving, a flag being raised, the cabin porch now busy with volunteers. Brian set the tablet aside and looked out at the Pacific. The tide was pulling out. He had not recovered his name, but his sacrifice had built something that would outlast a gossip column. The moving truck bumped over the curb and turned onto the county road. The Hammond name was off the mailbox. Maria Hammond, wearing a county-issued safety vest, bent over a highway shoulder, picking litter with a mechanical grabber. Mark Hammond sat in a windowless cubicle, processing freight invoices for a company with a different name. Her probation officer checked a box. Monthly compliance was now the Hammond family's only legal metric. No federal agency would ever process a clearance for Mark Hammond again. The debarment was permanent. The HOA's insurance policy paid nothing. Witness protection violations were excluded from every line of coverage. A young family moved into the old Hammond house. A tricycle sat on the lawn where Maria's fuchsia blazer had once hung. Maria walked past the Pinewood Estates entrance on her way to probation. She didn't look up.
A Halloween column. 15 years of clearance. Gone.
The moving truck vanished beyond the tree line. The Hammond chapter of Pinewood Estates was closed. 6 months later, the coffee maker clicked on at 5:45. The sound was the only clock Brian needed.
The ocean doesn't care about federal witness protection. It just keeps rolling in.
He picked up a seashell from the porch railing, worn smooth by salt and time. A memory surfaced. The slap of a newsletter against a mailbox, louder than it should have been. He set the shell on the railing and looked out at the gray Pacific. The memory faded as quickly as it came. This cottage had no HOA, no gossip column, no name on the mailbox. Just the tide.
I am still under protection. Still a ghost, but the air smells like salt, not pine.
He walked the beach most mornings, never quite believing the silence would hold. Somewhere 400 miles inland, a veterans center stood where his mailbox once did. Brian Mercer kept walking. A man with no newsletter address, nowhere to be found. Maria Hammond cleaned windows at the county rec center, a bucket of soapy water at her feet. No fuchsia blazer, no newsletter column. Mark sat in a beige cubicle, sorting invoices. The slot for a security badge on his lanyard was empty. At 1189 Pinewood Lane, a veteran carried a mattress through the door of the new Veterans Transition Center. The sign read, Veterans Transition Center. The same pine trees that had shaded Brian's mailbox now shaded a community garden. Brian walked the shoreline, a small figure against the tide. No one knew his name. No one would. A red plaid flannel hung on a kitchen chair in a cottage by the sea. The man who wore it had no past. On a wooden desk, a red witness protection card rested on a stack of confiscated newsletters. The card no longer needed to be hidden. Maria passed the Pinewood Estates entrance on her last day of probation. She didn't slow down. Brian kept walking, the tides erasing his footprints, the coastline empty behind him. One Halloween column, one address. It cost a family their home, a man his clearance, and a whistleblower his name. The HOA newsletter never printed another word.